Hi everyone, welcome back to English 221. This is for our class for Wednesday, the 15th, where we are continuing with A Midsummer Night's Dream. As you know, you would have handed in journal number 1 on the sonnets, and I am in the midst of reviewing those, getting those back to you, and certainly I'll have them back to you before you have to submit in journal number 2, which is on Midsummer. And we are watching a performance, and then we are going to be talking about the play. My hope is that you have finished reading the play by this point. Keep in mind that a performance is never a substitute for actually reading the play itself. It's merely a supplement. And I hope you've been enjoying this version of A Midsummer Night's Dream that was filmed in Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, so that you can get a sense, at least, of the atmosphere of what a Renaissance audience might have experienced. Obviously, they've modernized it, so there are things such as lighting and bathrooms that we've become quite accustomed to in our contemporary days. But I think you can get an idea of how thrilling it would be to be a groundling, for instance, to be so close to the stage, even though you might be more uncomfortable because you don't have a seat, but you are right next to the actors, and we believe that the actors actually interacted with the audience, and that's part of the magic of being able to see a live performance. Obviously, we're watching a filmed version of a live performance, but the energy of the audience helps to feed the energy of the actors and vice versa. So where we left off, what I had recommended is that you watch the first 2 acts and that you begin to think about performance, since we are talking about performance. What I recommend that you do now is that you watch Act 3, and that would be Act 3, Scene 1, which is approximately 18 minutes long, and Act 3, Scene 2, which is approximately 27 minutes long. And you can see this in the notes below. What that would mean is that we would finish up the play, or the performance of the play, I should say, next class, where you can probably guess I'm going to be suggesting that you watch Act 4 and Act 5. As you know, we are watching a version that's being streamed through the GCC library, and from what I've seen, there haven't been any glitches. So certainly if you're having difficulty viewing the performance, let me know. As you know, this is still a relatively new service that the GCC library is offering. In terms of what you can expect with plot for the 3rd act, that now, because of the love juice that's been applied to both men's eyes, both men are now in love with Helena, who happens to be the tall blonde, not Hermia, who happens to be the short brunette. And during the time of the Renaissance, and perhaps even in today's time, tall and blonde was viewed as the epitome of beauty. So you can imagine the kind of tension that would exist between Helena and Hermia, these best friends, when it's Hermia at the beginning of the play who has all the attention, even though she's not tall and blonde. And then by the middle of the play, things have shifted. Helena is convinced that this must be some sort of a terrible joke that everyone is playing on her. Hermia is convinced that her former best friend, Helena, has stolen her man, which leads to the top of the pinnacle of the pyramid that I was suggesting, that we can assume that in Act 3 in Shakespeare's plays, that's where we're going to get the height of conflict, which is what I call the catfight scene, where the lovers basically almost come to blows, and if we were watching a tragedy, they would hurt and kill one another. But we're watching a comedy, so we know that we have to have some sort of a happy resolution. Lots of insults here. For instance, painted maypole, and it may not necessarily sound like an insult, but the maypole, which we will talk about when we talk about A Midsummer Night's Dream, is a phallic symbol. So if you are familiar with May Day and dancing around the maypole, May Day is a day where you celebrate fertility, and that's done through sexual activity, and the maypole is supposed to represent the phallus, something they don't necessarily talk about in elementary school if you are still celebrating days such as May Day in elementary school. And that said, that means that basically Hermia has just called her former best friend Helena a phallus. And the fact that she says that this is a painted maypole, painted is in reference to cosmetics. You'll keep in mind some of the themes that Shakespeare discussed in his sonnets, that cosmetics were false beauty. So basically, this is a horrific insult. But there are many others that we will be covering. But we need to have a happy resolution. The love juice is removed from Lysander, so he returns back to loving Hermia, which is how we began the play. The love juice remains on Demetrius, so he remains loving Helena. Now, that said, I don't know if that's necessarily the happiest of endings, but we do know that prior to the play, this is the way that the love relationship was. So we might say that this is a restoration of order, though I don't know if I would necessarily want to be Demetrius and being manipulated in this way with love juice. The love juice is removed from Titania, and this is where she realizes that she was in love with the literal and figurative ass. And, of course, the rhetorical question I usually ask at this point is, how many of us have ever blindly fallen in love with an ass? And, of course, that's how Shakespeare becomes timeless and universal. Nevertheless, what this means for Titania is that she is not able to retain control of the changeling boy. But what we do see is that both Helena and Hermia get their way. So in some ways, some rather progressive statements about female. And the donkey spell is removed from Bottom, so he returns to human form. And what we would see in Act 4 would seemingly be the resolution of all of this, but Act 5 is when we will get Bottom and his cohorts performing the play within a play. But that's for next class. So our attendance question, which would be due on Friday the 17th at 8 a.m. And again, if you need an extension, please let me know. And as I've indicated previously, you're not required to respond to your peers. I just ask that you read all of your peers' responses and my responses to all of you, since I will be responding to all of you. That'll give you a good idea of what we would have talked about in class. So thus far, so this is my question. Which actor's performance, so I'm talking about performance, not necessarily character. Which actor's performance did you like the least in the 2014 Shakespeare on Screen adaptation, and why? If you remember, the previous question was which performance did you like the most? Now it's which performance do you like the least? Again, no right or wrong answers. I'm just interested in your reasoning. So I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well, and enjoy your viewing, your continued viewing of A Midsummer Night's Dream. As you know, when we're done with A Midsummer Night's Dream, we go on to our next play, and that's Much Ado About Nothing, which is also about love and the complications associated with love, but from a realistic perspective. So no fairies are involved. And the sooner you begin reading that play, obviously, the better off you are, because eventually we'll get to the point of watching production, and then, of course, talking about the play. Take care. Bye-bye.